So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm your host, Regen Ray, and I'm so excited to dig deeper in today's conversation with our guest, who's been a nutritionist for 40 years and a regenerative farmer for 7 years. And I'm excited to talk about that Venn diagram of it overlapping. Cyndi O'Meara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ray. I'm looking forward to this.
Excellent. Share with our soil lovers a little bit about who you are and how these worlds collided.
Yeah, well, they probably collided before I was born. My grandfather was an Iowa corn farmer, and he believed when DDT started to be sprayed. So first of all, they sprayed arsenic and lead on the cornfields due to a locust plague, and that was 1938 and 1939. My mum was born in 1938. And then they sprayed DDT from 1945 onwards. And what's interesting is that my mum's first brother was born in 1939 in the middle of that arsenic and lead being sprayed. And he was born with hemophilia. And every brother after that, bar one, and they had 7 boys, were born with hemophilia. Now, if we go sideways or back in time, there was no gene for hemophilia. So that started, and I always question, was it the chemicals that began to be sprayed that had an effect? It didn't have an effect on everybody, but did have an effect on my grandma and grandfather. So then DDT was sprayed by 45. My older sister was born in 1959. DDT was still being sprayed until 1975. And my mum and my sister both passed away from cancer. So I had this inkling that chemicals were a big part of what happened to them with being born around that spraying. It was heavily sprayed. It was sprayed on my mum for nits. It was sprayed everywhere. They said it was DDT was safe for me. So farming was in my blood back then. But I was brought up in Bendigo, Victoria, small country town. My dad was the local chiropractor who was the pharmacist, interesting enough. Oh. So very much learnt 2 ways of healing. And I was brought up in a household where my mum cooked, did a little bit of veggie garden, and my dad whole philosophy was that the body had innate intelligence. Give it the right resources and it will be the best it can be. And so for me, I wanted to have something to do with health, not sure what I wanted to do. So I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder because I was able to, because of my mother being an American citizen. And I did pre-med and science. And during that time, I was allowed to do a couple of electives. And one of the electives I did was anthropology and cultural anthropology. And it was the knowledge of hunter-gatherer, the knowledge of the agricultural and herding society that I realized that food was an unbelievable part of our survival, of course. So I thought I'll become a dietitian. So came back to Australia, did dietetics, and I was finishing off my Bachelor of Science, about to go do my diploma in dietetics, and thought, this has got nothing to do with what I learnt and what my mum and my parents taught me. So I decided I couldn't be a dietitian. It just was not going to flow with what I believed in. So went back to university, studied human anatomy, and did all the ologies, anatomy, pathology, cut up cadavers, did everything I could in the next 2 years, and realized that what I learned in my first year of university is what I wanted to teach people, and that was real foods. So that's what I did. I became a nutritionist, started practicing in Armidale, in Victoria, in the middle of Melbourne. And I don't know, I was against the grain, as you could say. Ate real foods, did everything in real foods. And this is what turned me to farming, was about when I turned 50. And I was always about picking, fruits and veggies and things like that. And not necessarily the organic movement was going back then, but, there was a question about farming practices. And about 50, I started to get aches and pains, still eating the foods I'd always eat, made my own bread, fermented my own foods, made everything from scratch, did everything right, and started to get aches and pains, started to put on weight. My hair got really frizzy and dry. I couldn't grow it. sore back, sore hip, tightness in my throat. Just all of these issues were going on. And it was doing an elimination protocol, because I knew it had something to do with the food I was eating, but it was about doing an elimination protocol where I got rid of everything but meat and veg and a few pieces of winter fruit. And I reckon in the first 7 days, I lost 4.5 kilos and lost all my aches, pains. Everything disappeared in that regard. So I continued the protocol for about 3 weeks, then started to introduce foods back into my diet. And as soon as I introduced at about week 5, wheat into the diet, I thought, well, within 24 hours, I'd gained 1 kilo and all my aches and pains came back. So my thought was, wheat's got something to do with my issues. What is it? So for the next 2 years, I researched wheat from more so from before after agriculture and the processing and what they do to it. And then I decided to do a documentary on it. And I had to travel the world and meet the people that I had researched for the last 2 years and interview them. And it was there that I started to really understand the agricultural practices of wheat. And it was at that point that I realized we were in trouble. If we were to continue doing what we were doing to wheat, let alone the rest of the food, and that's when I started to really learn about all the chemicals that were being sprayed on our food, how it was stored, pre-seeding chemicals, all of that stuff. And then creating my documentary, that I realized that I needed a farm and I needed it quick and I needed to grow my own foods. Because not only was food security an issue, but food quality was a real issue. And this was really before farmers markets. Like, they were around, but not like they are now. Like, if I go to my farmers market in Kawana, I can talk to my farmer. I know exactly what their farming practices are. So not everyone needs to go out and buy a farm. You can actually buy them from the farmers that are now as passionate as me about what we do. So that was my leap from nutrition to farming.
Yeah, nice. And I love that you had this urgency, like, I need it real quick. What year are we talking about here? When did this happen?
April 6th, 2 p.m, 2015.
Nice. Good memory there. 2015. Excellent. So, yeah, so that's, and so you could see that the agriculture movement had changed, and there was obviously like chemicals being used and processing, and then that's kind of slipped into other industries as well. Before we go into that, what was the name of your documentary?
What's with Wheat?
Yes, I do. Helen and Hugo, who founded Farming Secrets, have a photo of that they went to the screening and have a photo of that in our head office in the Patch in Victoria. So they were very big on that, and they could see the similar patterns as yourself. And, as soon as they eliminated wheat, or they started cooking, with better grains and knowing where the flour came from and how it was processed. In fact, down in their area, there's a bakery that actually grinds or mills the flour in front of you, so you can see that full start to finish process, and you can certify that what you're getting is actually processed live in front of you. So that's how deep they went into it, and all the biodynamically grown grains and food as well. So seeing the same response. And is it inflammation that is causing that weight gain instantly and all the aches and pains?
Definitely, because to lose 4.5 kilos in 1 week is not fat, it's water. Yep. So obviously I had inflammation in my back, in my hip, in my joints, brain, because about day 10, I'll never forget this. I'm on day 10 of the protocol. I'm in Victoria, I'm in the mountains, and I have to drive down the mountain. And I remember where I was near Bright. And I was driving through the mountains, and I start looking around, and I've got this incredible clarity of mind with this oneness with nature and the universe. It was like something clicked on. And I'd say that was my brain had been inflamed, and the water was coming out of there. It was the deflaming. And so body first, and then the brain. And then it was, so it is definitely water weight inflammation, because when you go over on your ankle, you see it gets really big. Well, that's not fat, that's water. And the same was with me. I had gained nearly 4.5 kilos in water weight. And then I'd probably gained 5 in fat as well. So I lost 9 kilos in 3 weeks, never to put it back on again, because I realized that it was inflammation, soreness, not moving as well as I could, not wanting to maybe cook with the energy that I normally cooked. So it was just that confounding of variables and factors that just came together for a perfect storm for me to discover what was happening. And boy, in 7 years, what I have learned. So
the farm was really a way that you could then have full control of the growing process. Is that what the farm was there for you? And what have you discovered since then?
Yeah, I have to tell you that as a teenager, my dream was to marry a farmer and have 12 kids, just so you know that this has always been a dream. Instead, I married a chiropractor and had 3. Okay. So that dream was always in the back of my mind. And in 2014, I think it was, July of 2014, I went to Europe and I went to a seminar called Manifesting Matisse. And it was about manifesting what you wanted in your life. And I'm thinking, I haven't got my dream of a farm. You know, I'm a sea slicker. I live in a town house, like a house in town, and I never got that dream. I loved hiking, and we would go camping and hiking all the time. So I went to this in Greece, I'll never forget, and I spent a week manifesting exactly what I wanted, down to pictures of fences and so the whole lot. And I put a date on it, July 31st. 2015. So I got it April 6, 2015. And that's why I know the date so well, because it had been a dream for a long time. So when I got the farm, I did the little cottage up that was an old dairy that had ended up as just a shed for timber milling. So I did that up and made it into a house. And then I watched for a year. I just watched. And I watched Jurassic Park grow. Just because I live in the subtropics. I live in a lot of water area. And I just watched this, what looked like a really neat and tidy farm, turn into Jurassic Park. And I called them weeds back then, but I call them primaries now. All started to go in the patches where they'd sprayed glyphosate. I realized that that's what they'd done because my neighbour owned it and he still does that practice. So he still, when he sees a weed, it's sprayed. Yep. He must just about die when he looks at our land because we know the weeds are there for a reason. So at the moment, we have cycles. And at the moment we've got cobbler's peg, and we know cobbler's peg is all about nitrogen and phosphorus as well as sulfur, and probably some silica with the spike. So we understand that process. And so we're working with getting our nitrogen, our phosphorus and our sulfur and our silicon right on our soil. So, but back then, all I wanted to do is cut those weeds down. So I had devil's fig and tobacco. That's where it started, you know. So I watched devil's fig and tobacco grow. It took over every laneway I had. I had no equipment. All I had was, you know, I was just watching. And I thought, what am I going to do? I've made a mistake. I don't know how to look after this. I have no knowledge of this. And I met a beautiful lady who lived down the road. Her name is Marag Gamble. And Marag Gamble is very well known in permaculture circles. And she came up and she walked, like I'd had other people, by the way, come in and they'd say, oh, yeah, we'll get the goats in and we'll spay the rest with Roundup. Or, yeah, well, and I'd like go, off my land, get off my land, you know. So Marag comes up and she walks around it and she said, the land's doing what it needs to do to heal, Cyndi. These are primaries, they're not weeds. They will go when they've done their job. But what I suggest, because I said, please help me. And she said, what I suggest is you find somebody who you can consult and knows about regenerative farming and permaculture and things like that. So I ended up putting an ad out with Seek and a couple other things, and we had lots of farmers apply for the job. And so it was a consulting job as well as working on the farm. And I picked this one gentleman that for the next 2 years not only taught me, but taught my son. And my son manages it now completely. So we learnt things with him and we made mistakes with him. So we had pigs and ducks and chickens and we adjusted cows. My husband didn't want to get cows. He felt that it wasn't right. And, you know, after a couple of years, we realized we were making somebody else money by fattening those cows instead of using our own cattle and knowing that we weren't putting chemicals into those cows, you know. So for the next 2 years, that's what we did. We learnt from this gentleman who taught us so much. And then after 2 years, I didn't feel we needed him anymore, but we would consult with him on a ad hoc basis. When we thought we needed some help, we would consult with him. So my son then took over everything and did all the management of our own cows and chickens. We got rid of the pigs and the ducks. And so he took over that management of cell grazing, multi-species, like pastures. And then I think about a year and a half ago, I was at a meeting and I met a gentleman by the name of Rob Wyborn. And I was just talking to him, and it was like farming, I think, and nutrition meeting. So where our two worlds collided. And I said, what do you do? And he said, well, I love syntropics. I went, syntropics? What's syntropics, So he explained it to me, and I said, could you come to my farm and see what you can do with my farm? So Rob has worked with us since December the 6th, not last year, the year before. We have, I could cry with what we've created. It's the most incredible syntropics, where my fruit trees that were struggling by themselves, which we had planted with our first consultant, are now thriving. I've never seen anything like it. It's like it pulses. Like the other day we did a cut and drop, and we did the comfrey and the canna and some arrowroot, and then we did mulching over that. So we cut and drop, mulched. I reckon 1 week I went back and I was walking along the lane, and the comfrey had grown, I reckon, about 7 or 8 inches, in old terms. The canna had grown a foot, and I went back and saw Rob and Brogan and my son, and I just said, they've got the finger up at you guys. You can't put them down. They just keep coming up again. But what that chopping and dropping is doing is we create our own fertilizer, and then we have grass beside each row of the syntropic, which we then do all of the mulching with. So I watch my fruit trees grow like this in a week. This is what blows my mind. Yeah. So we're growing ginger, we're growing garlic. They're our big cash crops. And then our fruit trees, I don't know what to do with all the fruit. I have no idea. I have acerola, I've got fig, I've got all your stone fruits, apple, all your citrus fruits, Davidson plums, these little berries, the rye berries, which I can't remember, what are they called? They're called something else. And then there's these other two berries that one has so much lycopene in it, more so than a tomato. Like it's just incredible. And then there's papaya and banana, and then under that story there's all my vegetables, So you can see how excited I get. I can go up there and live up there and eat the eggs and get my potatoes or my canna, which are my root vegetables, pumpkin, or my zucchini, my cucumber, my lettuces. So I love it.
Sounds delicious to live there. And how big is this space that you're talking about? Because just to put in perspective, how big is your land?
So we have 60 acres that are that is on a flat model, but we have hills and gullies and creeks and springs and dams. And so I've had somebody walk around and he says land value, you've got about 80 acres. So you've got to put that in perspective. But we only work the top 20 acres. The other 40 acres, the cattle are working on at the moment. But where we have all of our fruit trees and all of our growing would probably be on less than an acre. It's not much. It's not much at all.
Soil lovers, I just want you to really listen to a couple of things that Cyndi has unpacked there. I want to start off with the fact that the first year you just observed, that is one of the best tips that anyone can take away. Because I think in today's society, people get onto land or get farms and they want to get digging straight away. They want to start building fences and they don't stop and observe the land. And I think that's a really important point that you were able to practice and just sit there and let it go to jungle, let it go to Jurassic Park, and then learn the cycles of the different different parts of the year, the seasons, and not fighting nature, letting those weeds, which you now call primaries. primaries. I love that as well. But, the same in my world, I had to we don't call them weeds either. We call them like signal plants, what is that plant signaling to me? And we can use it as a feedback loop, like how beautiful that nature is going to pop up a weed, quote unquote, but it's signaling that it's low on nitrogen and that weed is going to fix it. It's like, what? And here we are poisoning it. Like, why would you remove the solution, And so your observation tip, I think, is super important. And then you partnered with people that had the same values and the same mindset, because this is one of the things that I hear about all the time is I got the agronomists and they were just telling me how many kilos of stuff I need to put per acre. And it just was totally value mismatch. So finding the right people who, like what you said, like get off my land, you have to be protective of your values and why you're doing it and know which advice to listen to. And so like that takes a lot of mental paradigm shifts to kind of know which expert and mentor you're working with and when it feels right, and the others you have to kick off the land, So I love that. Guys that are listening, we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to learn more about this whole gut and soil link because I think as a nutritionist, we're going to go really deep on that. So stick with us. Hello, soil lovers. I hope you're enjoying today's guest and this podcast. But I wanted to just let you know that when you get excited about soil, just as you're hearing about our guests, then you will want to check out the Soil Learning Center. The Soil Learning Center is a hub that we put together and digitalized all the content over the years that were originally on DVD into this online learning experience. So if any of our guests or any of the topics that we speak about during the podcast whet your appetite and you want to get your hands dirtier and dig deeper and get educated around different things around soil, whether it be biodynamics, permaculture, whether it be using a microscope, or whether it just be hanging out with other like-minded educators, mentors, and facilitators, then the Soil Learning Center is a place for you to hang out and dig deeper. That's the soillearningcenter.com. We have lots of different programs, courses, and even a membership. So if you want to belong to a community of other soil lovers, then that's the place to hang out. Well, until we meet again, enjoy the rest of this podcast. Back to the program. Welcome back, soil lovers. You're hanging out with Cyndi O'Meara and myself, Regen Ray. We're about to talk about the links between soil health and gut biome and gut health. Cyndi, as a nutritionist and someone who's got your own land and you've studied this by what you shared before for a very long time, and you were doing the whole dietitian thing and didn't really sit right, and then you got your own farm so you could grow and be in control of the quality of the food and nutritional density. What links have you discovered around gut biome and the soil that's on your farm and other farms?
Oh, it's a huge question.
Let's
start with the soil, because I think that's a really good place to start. And if your listeners have been listening to you, they will know what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway for anybody who might be listening that's not heard this before. So we had to help the soil get its ecology back because it had been sprayed with antibiotic, which is glyphosate. It's a patented antibiotic. It kills the ecology of the soil. So our first step was to get the ecology of the soil back. And we did that with trees. So we had a riparian area that we planted all native trees into so that our waterway would not lose much. We had no erosion, by the way, on the last floods that just happened up here. We were getting 300 mil a day. Amazing. No erosion. Our water ran clean. So we know we're doing the right thing.
Congrats.
So first of all, we fixed the riparian area by putting other natives in there. And then the soil was fixed through cattle and chickens. So, and the pigs were part of that and the ducks were all part of that. So we started to gain the ecology of the soil. And so yesterday I was digging in my soil and the worms are incredible. So when you have worms anywhere where you are on my farm, that you are doing the right thing. I used to dig in the soil, not see a thing, nothing. So I know my worms are there. What else is there is also all of the bacteria that the cows poo and wee on, and then the birds come through and scrap. And so my ecology started to improve. Then when the ecology started to improve, of course, I got more organic matter. So there were no bare spaces for primaries that needed to be there anymore. Other species were taking over. So I had organic matter. And we would have the cows go through, eat it, poo, wee, chickens go through it. And this was we've been doing this for 6 years now. So 6 years continuously, those animals have been increasing ecology. We now know that water whole is held in that space at a far better rate than anybody that doesn't have a good ecology in their soil. And when I'm talking about ecology, I'm talking about bacteria and fungi and microzymes and all of those wonderful factors that are about communicating through trees to trees.
Love it.
And it was really interesting. As I'm learning this, I'm realizing that I have soil in my gut that is identical, absolutely identical. So first of all, if someone's really sick and they have gut issues, first of all, what we've got to do is we've got to lay down the foundations. We've got to get the ecology right again. And how do we get that ecology right again? We either have to put the right foods in along with, fermented foods or broths and things like that. So while the cows and the chickens are doing it on my land, in my gut, I'm putting in foods that are going to help the ecology grow again. So as far as soil in my gut and soil on my land, they're almost the same. But where do I get, if there are no probiotics out there, where is it that I get my soil, my bacteria from to feed my gut? I get it from my food. So when I grow a lettuce and I cut it, wash it, make a salad and eat it, on that lettuce are soil microbes. Those soil-based microbes, then I eat and they help me digest that lettuce. But these days what they do is that they put the lettuce through purifiers, sterilizers. So one of the sterilizers is called Nature Seal, and it will completely sterilize that lettuce so that it lasts longer on the shelf, has no soil-based bacteria on it. And the other one, if it's organic, they put acetic acid in it. So it's still sterilizing the plant because of, it's by law in Australia, they have to do this. So when I grow my lettuce, I cut it, wash it, I still have all that soil-based bacteria on there that help me digest that lettuce. And you know what's really interesting is that I'm finding people now can't digest lettuce, have problems with lettuce. The other thing that the Australian Food Standards Association of Australia and New Zealand are doing is that they want to gamma radiate all of our food, which means not only the surface microbes are gone, but the internal microbes have gone. We won't be able to digest plants. We will have such a hard time because we are not replenishing the soil in our body, let alone the soil in the microbes in the soil. So we're in a perfect storm right now. We are sterilizing the soil. We're growing foods that have little to no nutrients in it, little to no microbes in them. Then we go and sterilize them, and then we gamma radiate them. And then what the hell are we doing? Exactly. It's like this. It's like,
if you're watching the video, I'm just shaking my head in disbelief and rolling my eyes at some of the things you're saying. This is just crazy.
It is crazy. It's crazy.
We need to talk about them all. Yeah.
And people don't realize this. They think that a lettuce that they buy in the grocery store is the same as the lettuce that I'm growing. And, to own 60 acres, to pay a farmer, to, do everything that I do costs me. But doesn't cost me in my health. And you don't have to do what I do. You can go to Kiwana markets. I live in Mooloolaba, the Sunshine Coast. So I go to Kiwana markets. I've got good harvest there. I've got Shambhala farms there. I've got local farmers that think like me. So of course I'm going to buy from them. I go to their farms. I've been to Shambhala. I've been to Good Harvest. I know what they're like. I've met them. So that's one thing. Another thing that people don't realize is there's this thing called spore-based biotics. Spore-based biotics can handle your stomach acid. So they stay encased, and they might be on a tree, they could be in the soil, they could be in nature, they could be anywhere. And what happens is that you touch something and put it to your hand to your mouth. It might be on your food, and you put it down. So the acid cannot kill its spore that holds around it. And it ends up in your small intestine. And what it does in your small intestine is it opens up, because that's the environment it wants. It then enhances your good bacteria and kills your bad bacteria. But nobody goes out into nature anymore. Everybody washes their hands until they're sterilized. Nobody is looking at the food that they're growing that has these spore-based bacteria. So that's another thing. Another thing, all bacteria make metabolites. These metabolites might be tyrosine, tryptophan, phenylalanine, folic acid. So all of our bacteria make these beautiful metabolites. It could be other metabolites as well. So in our gut, we make short-chain fatty acids, which are really important for our health, the health of our gut, the health of us. So all of these microbes make these metabolites. And if these microbes are gone from the soil, or you don't have them in your gut, where are you going to get your short-chain fatty acids from? Where are you going to get your tyrosine, tryptophan, and phenylalanine, which makes your brain work, which makes your nervous system work? Where are you going to get your folic acid so your kid doesn't have, when you get pregnant, you don't have a child that has midline problems, such as cleft palate or things like that. So, and I could keep going. So there's postbiotics as well. There's dead biotics in the ground as well that are also a part of us. And then when you eat the food, that's a prebiotic. So you have pre, soil, pro, and post. And this all comes from our soil and all comes from our food, and we are killing it. And this is, I guess, what I learned when that was a decade ago that I started on this trek of understanding farming and understanding these things. So that's just the microbiome in the soil and the microbiome in your body, and how integrated they are and how important they are for health, digestion, absorption, utilization, and the amount of nutrition that's in your plants. There's a really good book out, and it's not my book, but there's a beautiful vet who has got this, and she wrote the book, The Food Solution. Her name is Gundi, but that's not her real. Anyway, it's Gundi Rhodes, and you'll find it. So she teaches you about the soils, and I then, with my book Lab to Table, tell you what happens when it leaves the farm. See, the farmers see it as a commodity, not something that's nourishing a country. The manufacturers of food see it as a commodity that they can upscale, buy it for 35 cents a kilo from the farmer and sell it to us for $7 for 500 grams. That's breakfast cereal I'm talking about. And they ruin it. I'd rather buy the $35 a kilo lot than anyway.
Yeah. And where do you think this all went wrong? Do you see, with all your studies of the past and your farming background, where did we get it wrong when there's just so much evidence of how we should be doing it?
When we didn't observe nature and realize that things happen because nature is trying to correct what's happening. And it might be a locust plague, it might be a weed or a primary. And it was when man decided that he was smarter than nature. And it was when man started to do science. And I'm not talking about man as man and woman. I'm talking about, the human race that ends in human. Just in case anybody wants to take man out of human. I'm not sure what we're going to call ourselves if we're not human. But, it's sorry, that was a dig at all the semantics that are happening at the moment. But, we thought we were smarter. And it's when we start to observe nature. And I did watch Jurassic Park grow, and it did scare me. I have to tell people that. It's not something that you don't want to go and get a machete at and just start cutting it down. You want to do that. It's not as easy as you think. It's a scary thing, but I did do a really good job at it. So I just think that that's where we went wrong. And now we've absolutely destroyed 14 states in the US. They are destroyed. The soil is gone. You can talk to all my uncles who were pig farmers and grain farmers and corn farmers, and they know what they used to be able to do and what they can do today, and how much chemicals they have to use in order to even grow it. And most of that food is ending up on Highway 5 in California at the feedlots feed, and then they're filled with glyphosate. It's going to the meat. Oh, it's just a nightmare.
It is, absolutely.
It is an absolute nightmare what they're doing. But I really believe is that when we believed we could beat nature.
Yep, got in the way, didn't let it just do what it needed to do, and thought, like you said, thought we were smarter, and we intervened, and that runway, in my opinion, is running out. There's lots of studies, there's this, 60 yields left, whatever that seems. Yeah. But I worry that humans will wait until that happens before we get the slap in the face. There is no prevention. And that's why I love having conversations. And, I've been doing this for 4 years. You've been seeing it, for your lifetime from a nutrition point of view, and then also the regenerative farm. But I feel like we're still early, and we need change makers like us to get this word out. And that's the reason why this whole podcast exists. And we do get a lot of new listeners to the podcast who have those first time aha moments of, wow, I never knew that this was going on behind the scenes. And I feel like it's crazy that in one lifetime, like your uncles and farmers in America can see the depletion. It hasn't taken centuries. We've seen it in one lifetime. And David Attenborough's documentary, his witness statement on most streaming platforms shows that as well, that someone who was 18 going to rainforests and now 70 going back and looking at them and going, what did we do? It's so sad.
It's interesting. I was at a swimming hole that's just near my farm. It's very secluded, very deep and cold. And I was going for a bit of a walk, and I met a man, and we were just walking together. He was an older man. We're walking together. He was in bare feet. He was collecting rocks from the riverbed. And I asked him his name, and his name was Old One. And he was of Aboriginal descent. And we had an incredible conversation about the forest that I was in and what had happened to it. And he said, what we need to do is bring back the giant ferns. And the giant ferns are filled with magnesium. And when you walk under a giant fern, you give it carbon dioxide and it gives you magnesium. And people don't realize that nature is where we must be. We cannot be in a concrete building like I'm sitting in right now. We must, we must be in nature. And what else is that fern giving me that I don't know about? Do I not know about this? There's probably spore-based bacteria or biotics that are just falling on me. And, so our heritage is, and if you look at anthropological times, our heritage was that we saw the sunrise and we saw the sunset. We went to bed in the dark. We saw the moon and the stars. We lived by the seasons and the cycles. We didn't have mangoes in the winter. And this is a real issue, because when we look at how obese people are getting, we realize that they don't eat seasonally, they don't eat locally, and they eat ultra-processed foods, and they don't prepare their foods properly. So I really believe that once people get this idea, and I am seeing more and more farmers getting this idea. I have every year I do a summit. It's the last weekend in July. And by the way, the food solution lady is going to be speaking, Gundi Rhodes. Dr. Gundi Rhodes will be speaking at it. But I do this summit, and I always have a farmer or somebody that has something to do with farming. So I've had Charles Massey speak. This year, I'm hoping on Terry McCosker. Here I'm saying his name, but I'm not sure yet if he's going to say yes to me. But, my hope is who's the grandfather of regen farming in this country. So always I have a farmer. I have farmers that come to my Nutrition Academy talk. And I had Charles Massey speaking in 2019. I had farmers from Western Australia who owned 17,000 acres, were wheat farmers, conventional wheat farmers, and other people that came were crying in his talk because they had realised what they were doing to the land. Do you know what they decided to do when they went back? Every year they would change 2 of their practices to regenerative farming. Oh, it gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, totally the same.
That these are woken farmers. And then there's the farmers that you try to talk to and they just dismiss you and don't want to talk to you. So there's 2 of them out there. And I'm hoping, I want the ones that are open to inquiry, not the ones that are closed. I'm never going to change them. And I don't want to waste my breath on them. But what I do is I want to waste my breath, not waste, but give my breath and my words to these people who are open to inquiry. And people who listen to your podcast, will be open to inquiry if already not converted.
Yeah. And I love that as well, as like the whole commitment of just like two practices. Because I think sometimes what I've noticed as well is people discover this regenerative, syntropic, permaculture, and they want to do it all tomorrow. It's like, I've got to sell the tiller, got to sell the tractor, got to bring in the microbiome and get a, soil test. And you can't do that all in one day, and it is having that progressive plan of attack, and pick one thing, change that this year, pick another thing, do it the next year, and compoundly you'll then see the success of that, rather than getting exhausted in the first month because you're just trying to do everything. But it's hard, because when you have this penny drop paradigm shift and you start seeing the world from a healing regenerative, it's very hard to do some of the older practices, but sometimes it's needed, as long as you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that North Star is, where you're heading, So.
And it's the same with me, like I started with nothing. I just bought the land. I knew nothing. And I say to people, I've made mistakes, but I can't call them mistakes. They're learning experiences. I know that's not working, and I know what does work. And so we do biodynamics. So we learned with Charlie Arnott and Hamish McKay. We do biodynamics. We do natural sequence farming. We learned that with Stuart Andrews. We just actually dug a trench through, or a natural sequence farming trench, I guess it's called, through our syntropic rows. So, we're always gathering information. We do multi-species pastures. We're learning. My son is at a course that I've sent him to, where they have 2 days with the teacher, and then they have to go and practice for a month, and then they go back for 2 days and say, did this work? How did it work? So instead of the cells for the cattle being really big, they're actually very small, and we're moving our cattle every single day. And that is, we're going to see what happens,
Holistic management? Is that holistic management, grazing?
It is holistic management, and we've been doing it, but not in small cells. Yes. They've been bigger, and these cells only last the cattle a day. And then we've got to move them on. So, it means a lot more work, but we're committed to heal the land. And my son knows that land will be shared with him. He and his wife and children will be the custodians of that land. And hopefully that will go on, rather than giving it to everybody in the family and then they sell it and split it, and then somebody comes along and puts Roundup on it, which would just devastate me. But my hope is that I'm a custodian, he'll become a custodian, his son, who's only 5 months, will become a custodian.
Yeah, what a great learning place, getting in while they're young. And and I think I've seen so many younger people turn into ag. There's been this bit of a gap where young people haven't been excited for the agriculture space, but seeing some of the people that I've been hanging around with and seeing who's coming to the conferences, there is definitely that younger generation getting really excited about undoing what their parents or grandparents have done, and it's very rare to even find people who are 4th or 5th generation farmers these days that are breaking the mold. And like what you said, you came there and you learned, you didn't know anything, which is a blessing in disguise, because it's a blank canvas. There's no, my father did it this way or my grandparents did it that way. It's nice to have that kind of blank canvas. So if you're listening and you're thinking about being a 1st generation farmer, now's a great time to get into it. And there's so much support. You've rattled off so many techniques and so many mentors that are there willing to help you through your journey. Cyndi, it has been absolutely amazing chatting to you and hearing your story. And I want to just have this last thought in regards to nutrition. I've always had this kind of thought in my mind that in the future, we would be buying food, not by the kilo, but by its nutritional value. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on something like that, where nutritional density will matter when we have so many empty foods at the moment?
It doesn't matter at the moment, I can tell you that. People buy ultra-processed foods with no scrap of nutrition in it, with just a bunch of chemicals, synthetic biology, and all sorts of weird and wonderful things that they do to food. And they buy it, it's cheap, and they see it that way. But there is a burgeoning group that are not like that are starting to buy like we buy. Obviously, you and I buy, and probably your listening audience. So my hope is that we will start to do that. I was listening to a podcast can't remember who it was, but it was a guy in the US, and he's created a device. It's not the bricks meter.
Yep.
It's another device.
Was it Dan?
Who was it?
Bionutrient? Daniel, I think he was named.
I think that's who he was, yeah. Yep. And I'm thinking, wow, I would love to be part of that in Australia, because he wants to start doing it around the world. And, it is the nutrient density. You can go into the grocery store and check what the nutrient density is. And boy, I think people are going to get shocked, because they're buying empty foods. They're already buying empty foods. No wonder we have a chronic health issue amongst children and adults. Between 38 and 40% of Australian kids are chronically ill. If you're past the age of 60, 80% of you are sick with chronic disease and everything in between. I'm unusual. I don't have a chronic disease, and I'm 61. I've never taken a medication in my life. Even with those pains that I was having, I knew what pain meant, not to get rid of it, but to tell me there's something wrong, do something about it. Yeah. So, I think to buy foods for their nutrient load would be far better than by the kilo. It just makes no sense to me. And do I see it happening in my lifetime? I hope so. I hope so.
Mm. Me too, especially with the use of, so many QR codes now and like devices. We know we've definitely fast tracked the embracement of some technology, and maybe, scanning food and seeing its nutrient density in the aisle is a little bit later, but I definitely feel like a bridge to that would be, scanning a QR code and meeting the farmer in the aisle. You can watch a little video, you can see what their soil tests are like, and know that you might not be able to go to a farmer's market, but there's verification within the aisle of meeting the farmer that isn't complicated with all this red tape of getting certified and verified. And I've had many conversations with regenerative thought leaders around this whole certification and verification model and whether the regen space needs it. And most of the consensus is no, because we'll go down the organics mess. But I feel like we needed the organics mess to give value of what we're kind of all doing today. So I think everything's kind of needed at the right time. Are you ready to become the voice of the soil?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Let's do this. So if you could become the soil and give it a voice, what would you tell us as humans on the planet?
Please stop poisoning me, because you're poisoning yourself. Begin to nurture me, because you'll be nurturing yourself. Have respect for the soil, and I'll see that you have self-respect.
Wow, that is so good. I just got goosebumps. What you do to me, you do to yourself. Like, that connectivity is so powerful, because I think we have lost that. People throw things out their car window because they don't think that it matters to them personally, but it does. And when we see nature as one and us as part of that, you're basically polluting yourself, so I love that. And what a perfect note to end on. Cyndi, thank you so much for coming along and sharing everything you know. And I think we could chat about this for hours and hours and hours. Can you give your summit a bit of a plug? Is it an online summit? Is it a physical summit? How do I get there?
It's not online this year, thank goodness. It's at Kingscliff in the northern New South Wales. And we did that because Queensland had their mandates, which they've now lifted, but it doesn't matter. That's where we are at Peppers Resort. So I know that all the 4-day and 3-day tickets are gone. So we do Friday with me, the weekend, which is Saturday and Sunday, and there's still tickets available. And we have James Mukey, who was Australian of the Year. He's an ophthalmologist who realizes he was operating on people with diabetes. He's trying to change the Australian dietary guidelines. His story is incredible. We have Dr. David Johnson, a neurologist, who stops operating on people before he puts them on the ketogenic diet and functional movement. His accountant's not happy with him because he's not operating as much. So we have him speaking. And of course, we have Bundi Rhodes, who wrote the book, The Food Solution. We've got, who else have we got? I've got to think about all of our incredible speakers. Hopefully I've got Terry McCosker, that he'll be speaking. I know there's one more, but I can't think. Look, if you go to thenutritioneat.academy, so thenutrition.academy, and just look up Summit, you'll read all about it. The 2-day event is still available. And that, to me, is where all those brilliant speakers will be speaking. And I just remembered who the last speaker is. So we have a Q&A, and then the last speaker, we do breath work.
Oh, nice.
Just to get everybody out of their heads and start to work with their body. So we do an hour breathwork session at the very end. Most speakers speak for 2 hours. And the reason we do that is that we want you to get as much knowledge as you can from those speakers.
Full submergence. I love it. This sounds like a conference. And if you are listening and you may have missed the date, you mentioned it was an annual conference, so you do it yearly?
Yes, yearly, the last weekend in July. And this year, it's the 30th and the 31st of July.
Perfect. Well, I want to see if I can get down there because it sounds like an amazing 2-day event. And next year, I'll definitely do the full day. But thank you so much for sharing that. I think being around like-minded people, and especially what we've all been through for the last 2-3 years, really putting stress on all the systems and realizing that we need to bring some of those powers back into our own domain. So kudos to you for all the work that you're doing and being such a great voice. I follow everything you do on social media, and it's always hitting the right nerves. So that's a good thing. So thank you for all that and joining us today.
Thank you, Ray.
Soil lovers, there you go. That's an amazing conversation. Make sure you listen to this episode again because there was so much information that you really just need to get and understand. So with that, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into our wonderful world of soils. I'm Regen Ray. I'll see you next time. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.